Hi, this is Sean D'Souza, and you're listening to the 3-Month Vacation Podcast. This podcast isn't some magic trick about how to work less. Instead, it's about how to really enjoy the work that you do and to enjoy your vacation time. Hi, I'm Sean, and you're listening to the 3-Month Vacation. One of those big things that I wanted to do this year was to write this book, which is Suddenly Talented, and it's about how you can get suddenly talented. And it wasn't happening. Suddenly, nothing was happening. And the reason for that was this concept of research. You start reading other books, and then you suddenly feel very inadequate because they've got so much research. And I was very keen on finding out talent from a pilot's perspective, where things are so dangerous and yet there is no crash. And yet when we draw, we sing or dance or do any simple task, it seems to crash a lot. So I started talking to one pilot and the second pilot and then the third pilot, at which point I was told to stop it. I had enough research. And this is the final rerun of this series, and we'll be back in Auckland. But this message is about why research will drive you nuts and how to go about research the right way. Let's get on with the show. Let's assume you have guests coming over in 20 minutes. Now you promise them this special Indian onion salad. What ingredients do you need? Let's see. 3 onions. We'll need 1/3 of a cucumber. We'll need 2 tomatoes. We'll need coriander leaves, fresh coriander leaves. We'll need 1 teaspoon of crushed methi leaves, that's fenugreek. And then lemon. You always need lemon. 1 slice of, the whole lemon. Maybe half a lemon. Okay, so we've got all our ingredients. Are we ready to go? Of course not. You might have the onions, but there's no cucumber inside. You're pretty sure you don't have coriander or fenugreek leaves, though you may or may not have a lemon. Now, what should you do at this point? The slight obvious answer is that you have to scurry off to the veggie market to get all your ingredients, and this means that your guests are going to be ringing the doorbell soon, and you're going to be completely frazzled. This frazzled feeling is what most of us go through when we're dealing with research for an article. We know our topic moderately well, and we're almost ready to write. However, when we get started, we suddenly feel that we need more substance to our writing, and that's when we scramble to get research, and it's already too late. Which is why this article covers 3 core points about research. Like we always do, 3 points. The first thing is why we tend to depend on research. The second is why advanced research is more valuable than you'd expect. And finally, how to operate when you have no research at all. Let's start with the first point, the dependence on research. I clearly remember one of the earliest articles I wrote on the topic of uniqueness. I'd read this book called Positioning. It was by Al Ries and Jack Trout, and it was filled with great examples. Notice what I just said. It wasn't the internet that I was browsing through. It was just a book, and it was filled with a fixed number of pages and a finite number of examples. Even so, the article had so many case studies, so many points on positioning, so much uniqueness just streaming out of it, that I was lost. An article that should have taken me a few hours took me over 3 days, and it was primarily because of this dependence on research. The reason why we depend on research so much is because we feel a little intimidated by the depth of our knowledge. Well, we call it the depth of our knowledge, but we feel it's pretty shallow. And we rightly assume that others have written about the topic, and they've covered this topic in a fair amount of detail, and we can use that detail. We think, okay, let's go there, let's find those studies, let's find all that stuff, and then we can bolster the authenticity of our own article. Especially when we're starting out, we tend to have this sort of imposter syndrome. We find that everybody else, they seem to know a lot more. We feel that way. And this is the reason why we end up researching our facts on the internet, only to end up with frustrating dead ends. Very little to show for our work and all our time that we've spent in it. Now, the good news is that you're not an exception. Almost all of us start our writing journey and we go down this painful path of trying to find a slightly better way to get research. And some of us never get off that path, but there is a way, and it's called research in advance. And it's important for reasons that are more valuable than you imagine. So let's hop along to our second point in this article, shall we? Let's find out a bit more about research in advance. Two of my top favorite activities are drawing and drinking coffee, which is why I head over to a cafe in the neighborhood and I get myself a cup of flat white, that's a coffee, and then I perch myself near this huge glass window and I watch people go by. And then I start to sketch. However, if you were to look into the folder, that's the photos folder of my iPad, you'd find that I don't depend solely on my memory. And I've been drawing since I was a kid, so my memory has a lot of pictures in it, a lot of reference material, you can say. And yet, I still keep references in the iPad. And if you look at that reference folder, you'd find there are over 835 illustrations stored at this point, and I probably add 2, 3, 4, 5 every day. And the reason for this collection is merely a factor of speed. It works like this. I see a picture and I think, oh, this could be good for a drawing, and then I keep that aside. And by this little act of keeping it aside in that folder where I can find it, I don't have to scramble for it on the internet. The ability to pull up a reference is the prime reason for researching in advance. And even though the reference is right before you, it's still going to take time, it's still going to take energy, but at least you're not scampering down 17,000 rabbit holes on the internet. And this is so crucial if you want to write a good article, because an article has so many components. It has the headline, the first 50 words, it has the 3 parts, it has the questions that you have, the subheads, all of the connectors, the disconnectors. I don't want to go on, but essentially you've got all of these parts and all of them take time to tweak and fashion, and still we have this research to do and we're going to spend hours on the internet. When you have the research in advance, what you've got is at least some level of control. And whether it's an onion salad or you're drawing Pinocchio, having those ingredients in place is a huge energy saver. It's not just a time saver, it's an energy saver. There are also other hidden aspects of advanced research that most of us just tend to discount. And the first reason is the percolation of the idea. When we are prepared, our mind is not only calmer, but it's also able to spend that extra energy looking to enhance or to improve an idea. Let's say I have the onion salad already in place. Now I can experiment with a bit of balsamic vinegar, and it might not fall in line with the traditional Indian salad, but this preparation gives me the chance to be different, to be slightly creative. It allows for that tinkering. And it's similar when I'm drawing something. Say I want to draw Pinocchio, and now I don't have to summon all of this energy and find a picture of Pinocchio on the internet. I can start thinking of Pinocchio. I can start thinking of his nose. I can start thinking of nose rings on his nose. And then what would happen if the nose went back to its standard size? And all of this is percolation. I have an idea. The idea sits in my head. It might be there for a day. It might be there for a week. It might be there for a few months. But then at the right time, it's there. It's there to be used. And this is the core of creativity. To help creativity, you have to have the chance to get the research in advance, to be stored in advance, and then to be summoned like, hey, research, come here.
Good morning. How can I assist you?
And that's why I use a program called Evernote. With Evernote, I can take a photo, I can take a screenshot, I can use the computer, I can use the iPad, I can use anything, and it recognizes text. So that's really cool because it can pull up all of this information. So maybe I take a picture of a sign and it says no parking, and I only have to remember it was a no parking sign. So I type in parking and Evernote brings it up. It will pull up that reference as long as I can remember a single word, even if you took a picture of a photograph. As long as there's some words in it, you can find it. Alternatively, you can just tag the photo. I don't tag it anymore. I just take the photo and make sure there are words, and then I just remember the words and pull up the photo accordingly. So this is what I need for my article research. All of the stuff that I need is put aside in a folder called Stories, and that's why I have so many stories. So let's say I wanted to talk about Pinocchio. Now, we know that Pinocchio had this long nose and stuff, but the original story is that he died a very gruesome death. He was hanged, and I can remember that, of course, but the details of the story I don't remember. And therefore, I can go and pull up that story 6 months from now or 6 years. It doesn't matter. And so now we have this combination of not only can I pull up that research, but my brain has been working on it. It has thought about it at some point in time. And there is this drip, 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 drip percolation that's been happening. And when the idea is ready to go, it is almost fully formed. And so all of this research has been done in advance, and I'm energy-wise feeling good, time-wise feeling good. And you know this concept is true because you have experienced it. At some point in time, most of us have stepped off a plane early in the morning and found someone waiting for us. It could be a family member or a chauffeur standing with a placard with your name on it. And this planning enables you to get to the hotel or get back home, to unpack, and then to just relax. The opposite feeling is one of having to catch a bus, to go to the taxi stand, to drag all your suitcases for 3 blocks. And it's not a nice feeling. It's just one of complete chaos, complete pressure the whole time. And yeah, why go through it? At some point or the other, you and I are going to need the research. We may need it for our stories. We may need it as examples. We may need it as case studies. All of this makes our article more interesting, more drama-filled, more readable. That's what articles are all about. However, there will be times when you don't have this storage method. You haven't started up a file in Evernote. You don't have 500 stories like me or 800 pictures. And now you have to crank out something in a hurry. What should you do? This takes us to the third part of this episode. How do you write when you have no research? What do you do when you have no research in place? Let's just step back one tiny bit. Let's examine the situation. So we have no research. We want to write an article. But do we know what's the main feature of an article? The article is built up of structure, it's built up of flow, it's built up drama, and there's also information. But all of this is useless without the most vital element of all, and that's called enthusiasm. Without an enthusiastic creator, a cartoon looks lifeless, salads seem to wilt, and articles end up being just an endless drone of words. You have no energy to write, let alone research. But you always have enough energy to disagree, don't you? Disagreement is the spark that enables you to write without research. Let's say you're writing an article about how to get new clients. Look for an article that's already about getting new clients. Do you agree with all the methods? Do you nod your head sagely at all the angles of their argument? Of course you don't. We all have different ways of getting the same thing done. I might love fenugreek leaves in my salad, but you might turn up your nose at it and say, no, that's bitter. I don't want that. I want something else. So the moment you get into this disagreeable mood, you're officially a critic, which is precisely the moment you need to write the article about that subject matter. Remember, at this point, we don't have any research. We're feeling disheartened, very deflated, yet we can easily pick holes in another person's argument because of one solid reason. We have a decent amount of knowledge about the topic, about the subject matter. We might feel like we're beginners, we might feel out of our zone, out of our depth, but reading the other person's article, that gets us to realize that we have a totally different angle. We don't agree with everything. We may agree with some of the points, but then we may not agree with other points. And once that fire has been lit, it's relatively easy to continue to write from our own reservoir of knowledge. And that's just one of the ways to go about things when you don't have research. The other way is to talk about your own experience. Let's say I was to talk to you about how we run our membership site at 5000 BC. So what am I going to talk to you about? Well, I could have 3 core benchmarks, that is, a precise onboarding system, answering every marketing or technical question that is put forth by clients, and then creating content that's not necessarily found on the internet. So those are 3 things, 3 benchmarks that we have in 5000 BC, and let's assume that that helps us run the membership site. Do you have any problems as a listener with these benchmarks? Of course not, because there are benchmarks. We can then go on to explain every one of these 3, and we can go into a great amount of detail and get an absolute cracker of an article as a result. No research. The reason why we didn't need an iota of research is because we didn't need an iota of research. It's our story, and we'll tell it like we want to, which is a method that you've got to use as well. Perhaps you make a homemade shampoo, and then you follow some steps. Who cares if your steps differ entirely from the rest of the world? Maybe you're a copywriter, and you develop a sales page system. And this sales page system starts from the bottom up. It doesn't start from the headline down, it starts from the bottom up. Well, go for it. It's your method, it's your system, it's your way of life. You don't need any fancy, time-wasting, cell-crunching research to back it up. As people get more experience with their writing, they have to do this. They write a lot, they write more frequently, and they're more in demand. And they realize that they're not going to have enough time for research all the time, even if they've got documentation somewhere in Evernote or wherever they've got in files. And then they realize, okay, I can go back to what I already know. And it might not seem like you know a lot, but you actually know a great deal. And that's what you need to do. You need to tap into that reservoir of your own knowledge. And when you do that, it brings that factor of emotion, that knowledge, that inside knowledge that other people don't have. You might think everybody knows this, but they don't, because it's your method, it's your steps, it's the feeling that you've experienced, and it's different. And the proof of the pudding is in this podcast itself. This episode is almost free of any research. On the article writing course, someone asked me this question about research because they were struggling. They were spending so much time in research. And then I just started to write the article. I did the outline and I went from there. Now, I did a little back and forth to pick up the name of the author of Pinocchio, which is then when I ran into this whole how Pinocchio got hanged. And that tiny little nugget won't be used in this article. I mean, I mentioned it, but it won't be used in this article. It'll be stored away in Evernote, and then I'll go to it someday, and I'll be able to use it. So all of this writing, all of this information that you have right now, it was achieved with no real need for research. The reality is that you can write hundreds or even thousands of articles and never have to dip into research, and especially at the last minute. Now, this isn't to suggest that you don't store exciting facts, that you don't store exciting case studies. It's just that most of our lives are filled with activity. We don't have time to go scuttling around to find an exact fit for an article. In most cases, if you have done the prep work, you will have a ton of examples. But even if you haven't, all you have to do is disagree. You disagree with someone's idea, someone's angle, and immediately you get this fire in your belly. And now you can sit and write. That brings us to the end of this podcast, and I'm sure I have an onion salad to make today. But what did we cover so far? The three things that we covered were why we tend to depend on research, and in that we examined our deepest insecurities, that the article is not good enough, that we somehow have to get the facts, somehow we have to get the figures, somehow there has to be the story and the case studies. And that's something that we all do. We have this factor of we have to get this right. And that's fine, but we don't have to do it that way. Which took us to the second point, which is about advanced research. And it might seem very obvious to some of us who already store this away, but a lot of people don't do this. A lot of people don't store stuff away, and you've got to store it away. Storing it away is one thing, but the most important thing of all is being able to clap your hands and have it there in 3 seconds, or 4 seconds, or 5 seconds. But that's the hardest thing. Now, you might use any kind of software, but I use Evernote, and I pay for Evernote, and there are a whole bunch of reasons why you should use Evernote. The best part is that you could take a screenshot. It's not actual words on a page, and yet Evernote will find those words as long as you can remember one of those words. So that's really cool because you don't have to keep tagging all the time, which is what I used to do right at the start. And the third thing is how to operate when you have no research at all. And that is to find an article that you disagree with. So you go online and just look for the articles on Google, and you will find 2 or 3 articles. Or let's assume you just open up your email and you've got a newsletter from I don't know whom, and you disagree with those points. That's really powerful. You might want to sign up to your competitors just to disagree with them. You know, I said you shouldn't care about your competitors, but hey, maybe the newsletter is useful for you to get all charged up and write something from your own perspective. So one of my pet peeves is funnels, and if somebody writes about funnels, well, now I've got something to write about. And that brings us to the one thing that you can do today, and that is you want to store stuff right away. You want to start storing stuff today. There are lots of websites. There are lots of really good podcasts. And what I tend to do is I tend to go and listen to the podcast. So maybe I've just heard about echolocation, for instance. When I get back from my walk, because I'm usually listening to it on the walk, I will look up echolocation and then I will send that to Evernote. And now I have 2 or 3 articles on echolocation or Mount Tambora or something like that. So it's not just listening, but then storing it away because now I know what it's about, and then when it shows up several months later, I can use it. That is the one thing that you can do today because it also helps in percolation. So get yourself an Evernote account and start saving stuff, start saving text and pictures, and it's there. And that brings us to the end of this podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. And now it's time to find out what's happening in Psychotactics land. You know, there's always something happening in Psychotactics land. Well, we've got 3 of these courses coming up, the self-study courses. These are the last 3 for the year. They're in September, October, and November, and it's on uniqueness, article writing, and pre-sale. We have only 25 copies of each of these home studies, so you have to be on the waiting list to get them. They don't go out to the general list, and it's at psychotactics.com/ugoodies or psychotactics.com awgoodies or psychotactics.com pre-goodies. That's PRE goodies. And you'll find that they're very useful. Now, in spite of that, you might have a bunch of questions, and that's why you need to be in 5000 BC. Now, 5000 BC, as you will find out, is a great place to be. You might have been part of other membership sites, but this one's different because the motto of 5000 BC is be kind, be helpful, or be gone. How helpful are we? You'll find out for yourself. I have over 60,000 posts. I count as being moderately helpful, but you'll find that everyone in 5000 BC is very helpful, and it's unusual. Get to 5000bc.com and we'll see you there. Bye for now.